Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Ralph Bean. I'm the Agricultural Counselor at the U.S. Embassy in Manila, representing the U.S. Department of Agriculture here. Very happy to have you here this morning. Before I start in about the Philippine markets, I'm going to explain a little bit about who we are. You've probably seen this on some of the presentations from the other offices, but it's useful to know exactly who FAS is and what we do. I run the Office of Agricultural Affairs here in Manila, and we wear two hats. We're the U.S. Embassy's agricultural experts, and we're also the U.S. Department of Agriculture's representatives in the Philippines. We work in a number of different areas. It's sort of a one-stop office. So we cover marketing, trade policy, number of other things. If I just go through real quickly and list what's on the slide, market access, which means the legal ability to get your product into the market. Trade capacity building, which means the ability for the Philippines to handle imports and to regulate them in a way that facilitates trade. Market development, I have an entire staff dedicated solely to helping U.S. companies find markets in the Philippines and make connections with Philippine buyers. Commodity reporting, we do the USDA forecasts for all of the different crops. And food aid. Philippines is unusual among FAS offices in that we do have some food aid programs that have been very, very helpful to us on the policy and market access fronts as well. I'll explain a little more about those later. Okay, the Philippines itself, and it's useful to keep in mind, it's an island country, obviously, but 7,000 islands grouped into three major regions. Take a quick look at the map and familiarize yourself because these are very, very important in the Philippines. Luzon is where Manila is at. It's the largest island and most populous up in the north. Visayas in the middle was traditionally a leader in the Philippines and is still a major center for business and commerce. And then Mindanao, which tends to be the agricultural powerhouse down in the south, but is also a significant importer of U.S. products, including soybean meal and feedstuffs. So all of these markets are worth considering. And it's also important to remember how split up the country is with all of the number of islands. Total area is roughly equivalent to the state of Arizona, but it's very, very densely populated. Manila is one of the largest cities in Asia, equivalent in size to one of the Chinese super cities. So Manila in and of itself is a massive market and worth considering. Many of the other cities are growing quickly, following a pattern that we've seen in China and other Asian countries. Certainly Cebu is the largest city in the Visayas region, worth looking at, but also Iloilo and a number of other cities there. In Luzon, Manila is not by itself. We also have Batangas and some other important cities in the Luzon area. And in Mindanao, Davao is the leading city and probably the best place to concentrate your efforts. It's a very well-run city with excellent ports, as Cebu also has. And in fact, because of port congestion in Manila, we find some of our U.S. exporters are sending their cargoes through Cebu or Davao to other parts of Manila, to other parts of the Philippines, rather than shipping through Manila. Big differences in language, culture, business culture, and consumer markets in those three regions. So do familiarize yourself if you're going to work outside of Manila. Be sure to familiarize yourself with the place that you're operating in. And the people who can help you with that will be your importers. You're going to find your importer is your best ally in the Philippines. Be very, very careful who you choose to work with. Put a lot of effort and time into the relationship. It will pay you back. Now, in terms of Philippine demographics, I'm not going to hit everything that's on this slide. I'm pretty sure you guys can read fine for yourselves. So I just want to emphasize a couple of points. Population is 105 million and growing quickly. At that pace, they will probably pass Japan before too much longer in terms of sheer population. There is a lot of poverty, but there is a rapidly growing middle class. And urbanization rates are a good 50%. It's most of your consumer base is going to be in those cities where they're relatively accessible to imported products. But the one point that I want to emphasize here is the age demographic. 52% of the population of the Philippines is under the age of 24. Every time I look at that number, I come away with something different on it. The most recent insight that I had is that a good half of the population is of school age or younger. Just think about that. Think about what that means in terms of demand now and demand in the future. When this large number of young people come surging onto the market, become independent consumers, that is going to have a tremendous impact on what they buy, how they shop, where they live, all of these different things. Another useful statistic, it's a little bit old and the numbers have shifted around a bit, but I like it because it's very easy to remember, is that in terms of GDP, approximately 10% is accounted for by agriculture, another 10% by remittances from overseas foreign workers, that's Filipinos who live and work overseas and send money home. But then another 10%, and the fastest growing segment, are young people working in business process outsourcing. That's call centers. The call centers are entirely urban. They employ very young, well-educated Filipinos, and they really do represent the fastest growing market for imported products. As that population segment ages, becomes independent, starts moving into their own houses and having kids of their own, that is going to have an absolutely profound impact on consumer habits in the Philippines. So keep this in mind. The Filipino market is a rapidly developing one and one that's going to change a lot in the near future. Now we'll flip back to Philippine agriculture. Philippines is in fact a major agricultural country. They're one of the largest producers in the world of coconuts. They're a major producer and a major importer of rice. They tend to have shortfalls on that. They're an exporter of sugar and fresh fruit, particularly the tropical fruits, obviously, pineapples, bananas, mangoes. But they're also a major importer, and they are the U.S.'s 10th or 11th largest market in the world right now. What they're short of are mostly things that are not produced locally. Wheat has traditionally been the largest item, although that's changed recently. Wheat has been overtaken by soybean meal. There is a shortage of protein meal here. Also pork and dairy products. The Philippines imports large amounts of these. The U.S. is the dominant supplier in these markets. As you can see from the table here, China comes in at maybe a little over half of what we sell in the Philippines, maybe a little bit less than half. And that's likely to change because a significant part of that in the past has been canned meat, and ASF is probably going to have a very large impact on that. But we have had and continue to have a dominant position in this market. U.S. products are well regarded. We have long-standing relationships with Filipino buyers, especially for wheat, soybean meal, and other bulk items. So it's been a very, very good market for us. We face increasing competition. Other countries are starting to recognize the growth and the potential in the Philippine market. So we really do have to keep a strong game going in order to maintain our position here. In terms of what we're exporting, once upon a time, wheat was far and away the largest item. It has been overtaken quickly by soybean meal. And all of this feeds into something that I'll talk about at the very end of the show, called what I call the protein story. Because wheat, soybean meal, and dairy products were three of the leading items for us in the past. Now, if you kick over to the high products, we've lost some ground on dairy. This is the one area that we've lost market share. A lot of inexpensive European-sourced whole milk powder, as well as the usual very strong competition from New Zealand. But it's really the advent of the inexpensive milk powder coming from Europe that's driven us back in the last couple of years on dairy. But we've seen rapid growth on the meat side, particularly pork and poultry. Beef has picked up. And in general, on the high-value products, most categories are continuing to grow. We had a bad year on wine and beer, but that will probably rebound in the next year. So all categories, prepared foods especially, have seen a lot of growth. Okay, looking at the different categories, you can see that it used to be dominated by bulk products, but in recent years, the high value and the intermediate have really been the growth categories for us. So that just kind of reemphasizes the earlier story. Now, talk a little bit about where anybody moving packaged foods is likely to end up selling them. This market is developing like other markets that we've seen in Asia, from small individually owned operations to a lot more chain supermarkets. You can see on the second graph that retail sales have been going up. There's also been a shift that doesn't show up in here to more supermarkets. The mom and pop shops still dominate mainly in the countryside. Wet markets don't show up here. They still dominate, particularly for meat and products like that in the countryside. In the cities, we're starting to see the shift that we've seen elsewhere in Asia. More and more of the dry goods have gone into supermarkets. That one's pretty much gone out of the wet market. And now we're seeing the meat, starting with poultry, shifting more and more to a frozen product that's presented cut up or whole birds in the supermarkets. And eventually, my guess is we'll start to see the same pattern affect pork and beef. And the last thing to go from the wet market is always the fresh fruit and vegetables. Retailers here have had the same issues with handling fresh vegetables, especially, that retailers throughout Asia have had. So I suspect that the wet markets and farmers markets will continue to be where people go for their fresh fruits and vegetables for a very long time to come. Hypermarkets are picking up. Club stores like S&R, which is very, very similar to Costco in the U.S., have become very popular, especially in the cities, as the urbanization rates pick up, and you're going to see a lot more of those kinds of stores. Now, food manufacturing is also an excellent category. We encourage all of you who have ingredients products to look into the Philippine food manufacturing markets, because this country is home to some of Asia's most modern, largest, and best run food manufacturing companies. Apart from the internationals like Nestle that you'll see up there, San Miguel is an 800-pound gorilla in the area, but also Universal Robina Corporation is less well known outside the region, but is a major exporter of processed foods out of the Philippines throughout the region. They have factories in other countries. Also, Coca-Cola has operations here. Just go down the list. There are a huge number of very, very powerful companies that do great business throughout Southeast Asia. And if you're looking to adapt your product to local dining styles, nothing works better than giving them the ingredients and letting them make their own foods with those. They do the marketing for you. You just send it straight into them. Now, food service is another one I want to take a little time with, because the Philippines really does outperform on food service, particularly restaurants. If you go to a Philippine mall and just count the number of stores that you see there and count up the number that are food service establishments versus merchandise and other products, you're going to find that A typical Philippine mall has a lot more food service than you would find in the United States or in most other countries. Uh, the Philippine culture is a very social culture. People spend a lot of time socializing, and malls have become the new town square. This is where people go in their off time. They take their kids there. There are a lot of entertainment venues for kids, and they spend a lot of time socializing. And in the Philippines, socializing means eating. People socialize over food and drink here. So the malls are packed full of food service establishments. It's a great way of marketing your products. They have a very strong interest in reliable, high-quality ingredients to distinguish themselves. And this trend is not going to change. Take a look at those numbers. The growth has been steady. And if you hark back to those demographics I was talking about, all of those young people that are going to come online as, heads of family, they're going to start their own families, they're going to have their own apartments. And then if you go out and you look at the housing that's being built, it's the new housing in the cities where the growth is really at, is mostly on what I would call a Hong Kong footprint. They're small apartments with galley kitchens. So the options for busy parents to feed their families are going to be kind of limited. They don't have the kinds of kitchens in their own house that their parents had. And so they're going to spend a lot more money going out or getting food delivered. So food service, as much as it seems to outperform now, I honestly think it's going to do even more so in the future. So this is an excellent area. Another point to make is that U.S. franchises are very common here. Almost anything we have in the United States, they already have here. They also have U.S. food franchises that have ceased to exist in the U.S. The leading pizza chain in the Philippines is Shakey's Pizza. Kenny Rogers Roasters, which has disappeared from the U.S., is still going strong in the Philippines. They also have Halal Brothers. They have any number of U.S. Based franchises out here, IHOP, Pancake House, certainly Starbucks, Seattle's Best. You can just go down the list. They also have their own chains. Jollibee is a global brand. They now own majority stock in Smashburger in the U.S. and are expanding throughout Asia and throughout the world. So the Philippines is an excellent place for food service, whether it's franchising, fast food, fine dining. It's all moving very well here, and an excellent market. Again, this is a good one to work with your importer on. If you are interested in targeting this category, find yourself an importer who specializes in it. Because in the Philippines, everything is about relationships. You need to have an importer who will represent you well if that's what you want to target. Now back to the protein story. This is kind of an additional point that I wanted to make. Most of what I've been talking about up to now has been high-value products, meat, particularly the packaged products going into retail, again, specialty cuts, things like that going directly into food service. The protein story has been what's really driving the big numbers here, though. Philippines has always been a good importer of wheat, and imports of wheat continue to grow at a moderate pace as people switch from a diet based mainly around rice and fish into more wheat and meat, more breads, things like that. But that growth on wheat is running 1% to 2% and has been rapidly overtaken by soybean meal, which jumped by, I don't have the number on hand right now, but it's in the double digits easily. The growth has been very, very fast in recent years. Also feed grains. And all of this, the meat, the dairy, all of these fast-growing categories speak to the fact that the Philippines is now climbing, is now started on that same climb that we saw in other Asian countries, where as incomes grow, people upgrade their diets. They're eating more meat. And that shows up not just in the meat numbers, pork, poultry, beef, and some of these numbers on the slide are a little understated because they're showing imports in the case of pork, all they're really showing are the cuts, but if you got into the offals and added that in there, you would actually get a much sharper growth pattern. Similar question for the poultry, where the growth has really been in the mechanically separated poultry for use in sausages, hot dogs, and similar products. But that growth across the board has been very, very rapid. Then you see the growth in dairy, which quite simply is another part of that protein story. That's more protein going into children's diets, into people's diets, and you also see it in the feed grains. The feed grains are going to feed the growth of the Philippines' own animal sector. They're producing their own protein, and it's not enough. Even with that increase in feed grains exports, which by itself is an excellent market for us, it's not enough, so they're increasing imports of pork, poultry, beef, dairy products, the whole 9 yards. I expect this explosive growth in protein consumption to continue for the near future. There's a lot of poverty here. There's also a lot of growth. So I think that you're going to see this pattern continue for a number of years going forward. Now, that's the basic story that I have for you. If any of you have specific questions about the Philippine markets, my office door is always open. You're welcome to send us emails. You're welcome to visit. If you would like to find your own contacts in the Philippines, we keep importer lists and a number of other, we have reports that will outline different market prospects. Please feel free to contact us. That's what we're here for. I have a marketing team ready to help you. So please reach out, get in touch with us. We'd love to talk to you. Thank you very much.